Meet Dad. He's a real man.
We're going to play a wonderful game called Who is My Daddy and What Does He Do?
I am your father.
This thing rules. The thing rules.
Oh, hey, what's up? I'm Brian Altano.
And I'm Max Scoville.
This is a show where we discuss something we love,
Unpack why we love it,
explain where it came from,
try to remember our first impressions of it,
share our weird stories about it,
maybe learn something new about it along the way.
but first and foremost, we're here to celebrate the fact that this thing rules.
So we're here and we're exhausted to talk about something that ultimately rules, but does in fact have its downsides, and that is being a dad.
Yeah. Easier than being a mom. Let's get out the gate right there and say
Oh yeah,
that.
no, completely.
We didn't have to push kids out of our bodies or
No,
keep
for
them
sure.
in there. We had a, like we could drink beer and wine and take shots that whole
Yeah.
time. And
In that order.
in that order. And then our wives were just like, yeah, I'll have a mocktail with an edible flower in it or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, ultimately at the end, we got kids and we became dads at different times. But both of us have been on this journey for several years now, and I fucking love it. It's
So
great.
we're both what they call girl dads.
Girl
which is
dads,
like,
that's
it's
right.
like the evolved form of a man baby. It's just no, it's
Mr. Moms or whatever they called
Yeah.
it in the 80s. Yeah, girl
What-
dads.
Who cares? Yeah, but no, like you have what? She's what, 6? And mine's
6.5.
mine's 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that also, like, the developmental leaps that happen early on, especially. Like a 3-year-old and a 3 3/4-year-old is like leaps and bounds apart.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
that's
like,
why
I mean,
people are always like, well, why are you saying half? And you're like, well, first of
Yeah.
all, kids love that because kids are always counting to the next number. Even when kids don't know what half of something is, they know that they're on their way to the next number. But also because, like, yeah, when you say, like, I have a 2-year-old or a 2.5-year-old, it's like, oh, that's like, very huge leaps that happen there. But
I remember being like so annoyed at people, prior to having a kid, when they would say the number of months that their child was.
yeah,
Where it's like, we get like a 17 3/4 month-year-old, and you're like, what? It's
A
like
lot-
when kids in high school are like, we've been dating for 3 weeks, we're celebrating our anniversary, and it's like, that's not what that word means, but like, okay.
what I like, one of my favorite memories with my kid happened a couple years ago, where I think it was during the pandemic, and we were just watching a bunch of Star Wars stuff, and she was really into it, like your kid is now, and she was just naming all these characters, and she was like less not even 2 years old, so she was saying all their names wrong, and it was really funny. And I put together this this graphic of all of the Star Wars characters and the way she said all of their names, and it was like really silly. And see, I couldn't even say that. And I said that my 20-month-old is really into Star Wars, and here's blah blah blah. And it was one of those things I just kind of put out there, and then it just blew up. And when it still like ends up on these like all these like feel good Reddits and blogs and stuff like that, and like allcutepics.net or whatever the fuck. And Mark Hamill saw it, and then he signal boosted it and became this whole thing. And it was very cute, and we got the interaction framed, and it's in a room. But it also got a whole bunch of people who came in who were just like, why are you saying 20-month-old? Why don't you just say 1-year-old? And I'm like, well, because it's not a 1-year-old and a 21-month-old are different species entirely almost. And then a 2-year-old is different than that. And also, like, I didn't make this up. This is people who sell clothes and also medicine made this up. Like, this is done like by doctors and Target, I guess. Like, you can't just go into a store and just be like, I'm gonna get clothes for a 2-year-old for my 16-month-old because get close enough because it might not fit, right? So yeah, I didn't make that up. Don't shoot the messenger. But that's a thing that exists. But ever since then, it's been years. That's a lot easier because you can just tell people, hey, my kid is 5, my kid is 6, and that has just been amazing to see. Like the way, like I'll see your kid every couple of weeks or every couple of months, and it's just Pokemon evolutions. Like
Yeah.
it's just night and day, just huge leaps. And it's just been really fun because I think that like you and I we've been friends for 15 years, roughly, maybe a little more. And we were friends for a lot of those years. Most of those years we didn't have kids. We didn't even think about kids. Kids would have died.
Yeah, no,
near
we were
us.
we were the worst possible candidates for responsible parenting, and it's funny because a lot of that stuff is thoroughly documented in case we ever get killed in a silo explosion or whatever, and
we were like drunk in
daughters
7-Eleven.
Yeah,
peeing in the sink at Safeway.
Which I think is that's a lot of people do that. There's always that
you got to do it.
Get out of your system thing, but I don't know. We still get up to some trouble as dads, but like there's a thing that happens where suddenly there's not like your universe shifts. Suddenly it's like somebody else is more important, and that's a thing that's really hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And I think people have expectations of what it's like to become a parent, and for moms, the one thing that I'd say that they have it slightly easier is that they bond with a kid before dads do. And
yeah, very early on.
Yeah, I mean they grow the kid inside them, which is like that I can't even pretend to begin to comprehend what that's like. But there's that thing that happens where like, and again, we've been going on about how great it is being dads, how much we love being dads. That early stretch fucking sucks.
Oh yes,
it is fucking terrible. And the worst thing about it is that like there's a certain amount of isolation that you have because suddenly, I mean, my daughter was during like COVID lockdown basically, so there was isolation in that sense. But there's also this expectation that all you've ever heard about parenting is. I feel like the early years, it's the most magical thing ever. Having a baby's the best. Being a parent's the coolest thing you're ever going to do. And then eventually there's like, I have teenagers and they called me the C word and hit me with rocks. And they just like, I snapped a blanket in half. Yeah. It's just like, it's
a new C word too, that like, you have to go online and learn.
They learned it on TikTok. It's
what's that?
Different C word. It's backwards. I don't even know how to pronounce it. No, but there's the sort of like tired parent, like groaning about that. There's the newborn thing, but ultimately the message that drowns it out is that parenting is great. It's wonderful. It's magical. You're going to love it. And early on, I just felt guilty because I wasn't having a great time. And there's a cool minute there where like, it's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of very gross shit, like literally, and weird sleepless nights and a lot of you and your partner on completely different wavelengths, and it's just it's your entire universe is flipped upside down. And there's also that terrifying thing where you're like, oh fuck, this is the rest of my life. Yeah, this is not. Yeah. There's no backseats here. Like this is a sudden thing. Like there's no, you can't.
And it doesn't seem like it's gonna get better at all during that, because it's just the days are like 70 hours each and you don't sleep and you feel insane. I remember like my anecdote for this is, so I have a niece who is like the same age difference between your kid and my kid, and she was like 3.5 when our kid was first born, and my wife was holding our kid, and she got to meet her, and my sister-in-law was like, oh my God, she's so beautiful. Like, they're so precious at that age. And my wife was like, do you miss when your daughter was this age? And she just goes, no. Yeah. And I was like, oh, why? And my wife and I were sort of taken aback, and I'm like, well, I mean, we think it's great. Cause like, and she was just like, it's so much better when like, they can be like, I'm hungry, or they can be like, I gotta go poop. Like once they start like actually talking to you and communicating with you, and like, maybe they're out of the diapers or whatever it is. Like there's all these leaps and bound things that happen. That's not just like, I'm an egg that shits and vomits on your shirt and I explode and cry and I'm unpredictable and crazy and I'm always hungry unless I'm sleeping. And while I'm sleeping, I could wake up at any moment and destroy everything. Yeah. Like early on, I remember like we had our kid in a 1-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, and there was like a 3-day stretch where we're like, okay, I think like, she's 6 days old, 7 days old now. let's put her in a stroller. Let's get out. Let's go to a restaurant in the neighborhood. We lived in Hayes Valley, and there's a bunch of spots there we really loved. And we're like, well, let's put her in there, and we'll take her out. It'll be great. And we put her into the stroller, all bundled up. Because, like, you know, you put way too much clothes on them, but then they're too hot or then they're too cold. And she just immediately shit herself. Like, just immediately. So we pick her up, we take her out, get her changed, put her back in, and she starts screaming because she's, like, really hungry. So we're like, all right, we'll give her the bottle now instead of before we go there. So she gets the bottle and then immediately throws up all over her clothes and all over the stroller. So we took her out and just washed down the stroller, changed her clothes, gave her a bath, and just, like, sat on the couch, and I just, like, ordered DoorDash. And I was like, well, we tried. And so, yes, that part is not great.
No, it's terrible.
Really
the way I
not
always
great.
kind of explain it too is it's like a reverse Metroidvania where you start out with all this ridiculous gear and you've got like a little vehicle for the baby and like different armor options and like, you know, a grapple beam and there's just all this stupid shit you have to carry around. You gotta sterilize the bottles. You gotta clean all the bottles. You gotta have frozen breast milk and like a, you know, catheter IV drip bag or whatever. Like there's all this ridiculous accoutrement.
Screen protector.
But then you gradually shed it. Like it just slowly kind of goes behind you and suddenly you just have like something in your house. You're like, we don't need that anymore. Like,
yeah, you just give it away to a different parent. It's like, it's kind of amazing. You spend all these months like researching it. You buy all this shit before. It reminds me of like what I used to do with like Nintendo would be like, we're putting out the Nintendo 3DS. And I'd be like, before that, I'm going to get a deluxe stylus and a carrying case and like all this extra shit. And then little by little, you're like, I don't really need any of that. And like, you just kind of get rid of it and give it away. And it's kind of wonderful. Cause like, yeah, very early on, I remember like flying cross country a lot because my whole family's on the East Coast. And, you know, like we would be there with like the pack and play, which is like it's like a fucking bed that it's also like a trampoline that opens up into like a tent or a fort. And then you need a travel car seat and like diapers and wipes and all this extra shit. And then like now, like I just get in the car, my kid's in the back seat, backpack's on the floor. She gets up and she just puts her backpack on and gets on the airplane. There's like no bullshit. If she has to piss her shit, you know, I let her, you know, I'll walk her back there or whatever. But I'm like, you're good. You got it. You know what to do.
We're like approaching that point where, you know, ultimately like the stuff we bring along is generally just for her entertainment.
Yeah.
The car seat is a big one. That's a whole like logistical hurdle where you're like, oh, let's just take an Uber. Oh, wait, that's a whole thing, you know, and it doesn't work so hot. And she, you know, she also like, she can walk, she can run, do all that stuff, but she's at that age where she just really doesn't want to walk sometimes. And
just wants to be carried.
Yeah, she wants to be carried.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know, she's enormous. She's a very large kid. We both have very tall kids, which is like kind of funny because I remember seeing this thing about like, the problem with being like a tall girl is that like you can't sit in a dude's lap because it's like when a greyhound jumps on somebody's lap or like a Great Dane where it's just like it's like, oh, like a little lap dog, like, oh, but it's like a fucking Scooby Doo jumps in Shaggy's arms and it's like zoinks, like it's a totally different dynamic there. Lugging around a very large toddler is also kind of like that where you just are like you look old enough to know better, you know. She's like, my legs are tired, and I'm like, you know why they're tired? Because you don't walk enough.
No, my kid is like
rat.
My kid is 6 and she's like 4.5 feet tall now, and it's just like there's adults that are like 3 inches shorter than her that are like in real life that she'll.
Dude, no, she's literally up to like my wife's like chest, like
but the thing is, she's in first grade. She was in kindergarten last year, and she's still like a little kid, you know.
Yeah.
And so she still wakes up in the morning and she's just like, I'm sleepy, carry me downstairs. And I'm like, my fucking back, my ass. And then, you know, I'm bringing her down there and I'm like, this is like one of my favorite things is like the morning routine every morning is I'm a morning person. I love it. I wake up early, usually before anybody else. I go downstairs and make a bunch of coffee. I'll like watch horror movies and shit like that. I'm just up before anybody else, you know, get that little moment of quiet. It's still dark out. You're just sipping caffeine. It's wonderful. And then my wife is not a morning person and my kid is not a morning person. But my kid can be turned into a morning person using various tricks. And so what I have to do is basically like, not necessarily like theater or a show, but I have to figure out ways every single morning to get this like I'm me, this fucking hunched over, bald, miserable goblin man has to carry this like beautiful 4.5 foot tall, curly haired creature downstairs and put her in a chair at our kitchen counter, and I have to figure out how to make her smile and laugh and cheer up. And I do it every time, like every single time I do it. But it's like, it's like the first 10 minutes is just like, boo, you know, it's just like you're opening up at a comedy show and you fucking suck. And like, I'll have to do this thing where like, I've done everything from like stupid ass charades to like, I have this joke with her where she'll put her finger out like she's pointing at me, and if I go to touch my index finger against it, I pretend that she has a superpower that's so strong it will blow me back 15 feet across the room, and my arm or my body will get stuck to a wall and I'll have to like physically pull myself off. So it's a lot of like vaudeville bullshit. Or I'll be like, hey, I'm going downstairs for anything. We don't have a basement, but I'll do the thing where you fake
The Austin Powers thing.
Yeah, the Austin Powers.
He didn't invent that, but everyone knows it.
He modernized it, yeah. In the fake 1960s, I guess. But yeah, and like, you know, my knees aren't good for that shit, but whatever you got to do, and you got to turn that kid on your side, make them have a good time, and get them ready for the day.
Well, the other thing is sometimes they're people. Sometimes they just are on their own frequency, their own thing. Like my daughter had like she just had a shitty morning, and she just woke. I think she was a little bit sick, and she just woke up and was just like, every step of getting ready, every little step of the way getting to preschool, including dropping her off at preschool, was just a battle. And I just like stepped out and I was just like, what the fuck was that? But then the next day she woke up, or she didn't wake up. I was like up, you know, getting ready and stuff. And I usually like open her door a crack and turn the light on and sort of let her wake up on her own things. And I'm kind of sort of loudly getting ready to sort of kind of nudge her or whatever. And I just hear, "Ribbit." And I'm like, what the fuck was that? "Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit." And I'm like, is there a frog in there? And she just like hops out and goes, "Ribbit." And I'm like, why are you pretending to be a frog at 6:30 in the morning? But whatever, I'll go with it. And she was in a, you know, completely wonderful mood after that. And it was, I can't anticipate this stuff. I can't predict this.
No.
It's just a matter of like rolling with the, I mean, you know, to what you're doing, it's improv. It's all just like, yes, and improv. It's all just rolling with it and going along with the flow. And, you know, having some kind of a backup plan is always helpul. We got a few comments from our...
you get stuck in that why loop a lot, where they keep asking why. You've done that,
I do. Right? I Jeet Kune Do that shit. You got to go, well, why do you think? Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel good, does it, to be questioned? How do you like that?
I got caught in one the other day, and I just entertained it because I was like, who gives a shit? And like 22 questions in, I was like, because the patriarchy fetishizes war. And she was like, why? And I was like, I don't fucking know.
Long story.
Yeah.
So we got some fun comments from our patrons. It's interesting because we got a kind of a wide spread here. We got Michael Audette, who said, as a dad to a 10-month-old daughter, finding out just how much of a smile they can put on your face rules. Doesn't matter when/why, but it always works. I mean, again, having a 10-month-old, if that's putting a smile on your face, that is amazing. And that is about when it sort of starts coming to. I feel like the first like, what is it, the fourth trimester? Like the first 3 months are where it's really just like, what are we doing here? This thing is not fully baked. You know, sometimes they don't come out much earlier than that too. But like, you know, the first time like the baby reacts to dad is when it starts to kind of click, and when it starts to really
they literally don't smile. Most of them don't smile back at you for a couple of months. So like you don't even really get that. Like you get that adorable, cute little face, and
you're like, is this thing on?
Yeah, but like that whole thing where like you do something and they smile. The first time that happens, you're like, oh, finally, like the feedback loop is kicking in a little bit here.
Yeah, we have a video of the first time my daughter laughed, and it's just at me making fart noises, and it's still like the funniest, cutest thing. And it's like hearing somebody laugh for the first time is just the coolest thing, because it's like, you know, it becomes a reflex after that. It's a thing you can't even control it. It's a spontaneous thing that happens, and
then it fills the house for years. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think that was even more impressive than baby steps, which was cool. And the other thing is, I'd always ask parents like, oh, what was your kid's first word? What was the baby's first word? And so much of child development is just very gradual.
Yeah,
and it really doesn't. It's not like they just sometimes they do. Sometimes they just step up and they just go hot dog or like, automobile or whatever their first word is. Our first word, as far as we can tell, and again, I can't tell if it was an actual first word or just two syllables that formed a word. Like when you accidentally made a letter or whatever. You're just drawing zigzags. You made a Z or whatever. But no, she was playing with one of our friend's kids who's 6 months younger, almost like to the date, and she's like playing with him, and he's still rolling around on the floor and drooling and stuff, and she's like a little bit more ambulatory, and she goes, "Baby." And I'm like, "Are you like a Pokemon? You just shout what you are?" And then it was like 7 months after that until she started saying anything that was more closely resembled words. The other thing that was interesting is my in-laws are Vietnamese, and they speak Vietnamese with her. And Vietnamese is a language I will never be able to speak because it is like entirely tonal, and I am tone deaf. And I regularly have like a head cold and sound all stuffy. And so I would try to say, "How do you do?" And I'd say like, "I'm going to kill you with a broken bottle" or something by accident. But, she was hanging out with her grandparents all the time, and they were, hitting her left and right. And she understands Vietnamese really well. She speaks a little bit of it, but when she was, I think she said chicken in Vietnamese, or like we were eating chicken and she said it. But again, I think it's like ga. Like that's and it's like that could have just been a noise you made, and that's words. Words are just noises. Right. So like there's stuff in there where I think she pointed at rice and said whatever the word for rice is, but maybe she was just making that sound anyway. Like we couldn't get her to recreate it, so it didn't really count. But first words are a weird one. I mean, first everything's a weird one.
I don't remember specifically what my kids were, but I do remember very early on I was taking her. We had season passes to the San Francisco Zoo. And I put her in the car seat. I got in the car and I was driving her there. And we used to do a lot of like daddy-daughter dates to the zoo. I still try to do like stuff with her like that as often as possible, right? Where it's just like the two of us. And I was like, "Honey, which animal are you most excited to see at the zoo today?" And she goes, "The wooster." And I was like, "What? The rooster?" I was like, "They don't even have a fucking rooster there." like there's a petting zoo in the corner, but like they don't let you fucking pet a rooster.
No, that would be pecking and biting kids, going after them with the spurs. Yeah,
like they got a couple of goats. You and I went there like blacked out drunk once, and we were like laughing hysterically at the goats. Yeah. But like there's no rooster there. Like maybe in the gift shop, but yeah, no. Like you just they just say completely unexpected shit, and
I love it.
The thing we're doing now is it's really funny because my kid is like reading and writing a lot, but just started learning that at the beginning of first grade, and we're only we're like a third of the way through the year basically, and she's been writing words based on how she thinks they're spelled and sounding them out, which is really funny because it's like it's just like having a little idiot in your house. Like it's great because like they know all the letters and they know spacing and all that, but they just don't understand spelling. Also because like our English language is so fucking stupid. It is so stupid. Like
my best friend in first grade, he got in trouble because he was trying to play pizza parlor with his friends, and he wrote what he thought said pizzas, but he wrote piss ass. His teacher was like, "Christopher, what is this?" And that was, I don't think she was a great first grade teacher, but like, the kids they try their best. They do what they can.
Yep. They just write all these like very hilarious broken words together, and you're like, you go to read it back to them. My kid wanted to make like a pop-up card the other day, and I was like, "Oh, I know how to make those." Like you take a piece of paper, another piece of paper, you cut like these sort of rectangles in it, and then you kind of glue like little things inside of it, and it just pops up. And so she did all the drawings in it, and I just did like the cutting and the gluing and stuff like that and helped her out. And afterwards she wrote a story, and she was like, "This is the story of a cat who was a king and a mouse who was a helper, and then of course a ladybug who of course was a helper too." And then I was like, "All right." And on the back it says, "Cats can be kings, but also monsters, and the mouse." I was like, "The fuck story is that?" What kind of stories? It's like, why is he like, who is this coming from? Like, who is editorializing this? Like,
I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, it's so silly.
Yeah, we got another message from Noel Ryan. Noel Ryan, hit him with a scream, Montejo. He said, "My favorite thing so far about being a dad," I have a 15-month-old, congratulations also, "is seeing his goofy personality as he grows." That's that's a really cool part of this too, is that like they don't learn that. That's there.
Yeah.
Like personalities are just in there, and you talk to people who have two kids, and like one of my daughter's classmates, we're hanging out with them, and like there's an older sister who's like totally pleasant and wonderful, and then the younger sister is just like a demon, like just a little monster. And this is the one that my kid is friends with, and she's coming home with all sorts of like, hateful worldviews and stuff. No, but she's just like, she's just like a little bit.
Yeah.
She picks up some meanish behavior, but we're talking to her dad about it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, no, the older one," and he's German, which made this all so much funnier. Like, the older one, she's so pleasant, we liked her, had a good, wonderful time, and oh no, the younger one, she wakes up some days and chooses violence. Jesus, that's intense. There's a lot.
It was very like, this is not even like this bragging or anything like that, but I'm like very, very happy to say that my kid is very funny, and like that's not, she's not like interested in like sports or being athletic and stuff like that. That could change, right? Like we're gonna put her in gymnastics camp and shit like that, and give her fucking jujitsu lessons, depending on how many evil men are in power in the world, and it's just like, so there's things that she's not good at, there's things that she is good at. She's very silly and she's very funny, and her new thing now, which is like completely fucking me up, and it's almost to the point where I've like multiple times had been like, hey, you got to stop doing that, is if I leave the room for half a second, I'll come back and she'll be gone, and I'm like, fuck. And I walk in and I'm like, honey, come on, get your boots on. We got to get ready for school, blah, 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 blah. And then like a pantry or a curtain or a door or a blanket will fly up in the air, and I'll hear, boo! And like, she'll get me at like fucking 6:50 in the morning. Like I'll have a fucking heart attack. I'll jump 3 feet in the air. Like and I have to be like, I know this is just a phase. I know you're having a blast doing this, and I know this is very funny, but like 1 out of 10 times you're going to fucking kill me.
It's not fair. It is so
yeah, I'm
cheap.
going to fall down the steps.
Yeah, no, yeah, my kid did that once, and I don't know if she's. I think I maybe responded. Maybe I don't know. Maybe she'll probably pick it up again. I don't think she even meant to do it. She was just under a blanket, and I again like literally panicked and was running up and down the stairs, being like, "Oh my god, did she go outside? Is she in the street?" And then I went downstairs and was just like, I heard the blanket giggles or whatever, and I was like, "Oh, okay, great, thanks, wonderful." My wife did that when we were first dating earlier on. This sucked. We had this situation where like we had one of those like special keys that can't be duplicated unless you go to the landlord and give him $50 or whatever. And I wasn't officially on the lease, so whenever I got home from work, I had to somebody had to buzz me in pretty much, and so she would always buzz me in, and we were on the 4th floor, so I had to take this elevator up. So she had like a little bit of time to get ready, and she would always be like, she would just go and hide. And then she would just jump scare me. And I'd be coming home from work, and I'm like, oh, I'm tired. And then she would just go, bah! And I'd just be like, just scare the shit out of me. And I was just like, you gotta stop doing this. And the way our apartment was like, the door was in the corner of a hallway, and then it turned left away from the door. So like there was basically a spot around the corner. And one day she hid outside the apartment, and I was like waiting outside the door and like sort of like stealing myself. And I was like, okay. And then she just jumps out from this alcove where the fire extinguisher is, goes, bah! And I was just like, you cannot do that. It's not okay.
Fuck.
The funny thing is, though, I scare her all the time unintentionally. Like, I'll go up to her while she's like getting ready or something. I'm like, honey? And she goes, ah! And I'm like, I was like, you have no awareness of your surroundings. You don't, I can't hear anything. I don't I'll announce
You're like
myself.
7 feet tall too.
Yeah.
It's like, it was fucking Slender Man over here.
I'll give her like advance warning, and that'll scare her, like I don't know what to do with that. But yeah, I'm very excited for when my kid starts getting mischievous. That's gonna be funny for a second, and then it's just gonna get annoying. But Dave Whitley says, laughing at a genuinely funny thing that your kid did as a joke they made, seeing their brain work as they try to make you laugh. That's such a cool thing, because eventually they figure out jokes, and that's very funny.
Yeah.
It is a bit frustrating when they don't understand context, though. We're like, hanging out one-on-one, and they're like, fart poop or whatever, and you're like, very good. And then you're sitting at dinner, and they're like, time to talk about shits and farts. Let's do it. And we're like, no, not now. Please don't do that.
We're dealing with exactly that right now, and it's insane because of all fucking people, I have to yell. I yell things that I never thought I would be saying, like, "Hey, honey, we're eating. Let's not talk about poop." Like you and I have done podcasts for years with people where we would just talk about poop for 20 minutes during dinner, during the show, after the show. Just talk about shit and poop and diarrhea and ass and the balls. And
what sucks is we have like 12 years worth of just evidence that we cannot be taken at face value for anything that we tell them not to do. Like, it's just, got any proof of you swearing? Yeah, I do some cussing and swearing. I'm just bad language.
I mean, I gotta do shit now where I'm like, honey, put the lightsaber away and go to bed, or like, hey, no, please, you can't play Nintendo Switch. Why? Because you need to go to sleep.
Having to tell your kids they can't play video games is, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah, and it's like, well, daddy needs it for work. And she's like, no, you fucking don't, you liar. Like,
that's a fun one, is like, which toys are okay to play with and which are like dad's ones. I'm like, no,
which ones are collector's items.
Don't take the miniature Aggro Crag replica out of the HasLab Sentinel's hands. That's for the set decoration. Yes, you can play with the neon plastic skeleton. That's fine. That came from the Halloween store. Like, it doesn't make any sense. There's no rules or regulations there.
No, that's been very funny. It's also it's worth pointing out that you and I not only are dads, but we became like we do most of the pickup and drop off for school, right? And most of the cooking at home, and that just makes it so it's just very funny because like our wives come home from work, and you and I are just like, oh, I made like a pot roast, and the kids in their pajamas, and we finished homework already, and lunch is packed for tomorrow. And it is one of those things that was like a very specific gender role for a very long time. And the way the chips fell it's a thing that you and I do mostly now. And I love it. I'm very good at it. You're very good at it. It's just one of those things where we're like, I mean, what choice do you have, right?
Yeah.
To not do it.
Well,
like it's not Mad Men where you could just go have like 6 cocktails and come home and your wife's been on lithium all day making lamb.
Well, no, that's a lot of dads don't stick around. Like that's a reality too. And I having lived through the early months, I kind of get it. I definitely remember. So my dad wasn't around growing up, and I tracked him down when I was 20, and we have a really good relationship now, and it is like the best possible outcome, to the point where it's like sort of a Cinderella story, and it's like, okay, well, what now? And it's that's a story for another whole day. But like the odd thing about that is that I don't have any like firsthand experience of having a dad as a kid. So I'm kind of coming at it with like a blank slate, and just, going with my gut for the most part, or other people's do's and don'ts. And, again, it's also like some of it is just stuff you pick up naturally. Some of that's just, people have been taking care of children since we became people. Like, that's just how we exist. It's on some level that you got to figure that shit out on your own. But I remember just sitting there, and like my mom, I had a single mom growing up, and she did that all herself. And I cannot fathom what that was like to do both parts of that, and then, work a job and all this. And I just remember when I first had like little screaming blob, like when the first stage Pokemon evolution, when she's just like a Caterpie or a Magikarp or whatever, just like this useless fucker that shoots slime and makes noise. You're just like, what are you doing here? And I just was sitting there, and I was like, I think my mom is even crazier than I already did, and I resent my dad even less than I already did. Like, I do not blame him for not sticking around. And again, it wasn't like he just like went out for a pack of smokes and never came back. It was much more complicated in that way that things with human beings are. But yeah, I was terrified of that. And I remember you gave me you were like, you're going to do fine, dude. You're all right. Like, I've seen how you take care of a Pomeranian dog. You're going to figure this out just fine. I've seen how you pick up. And you're a good person and a caring person. And I think that goes a long way. I think a lot of people, I also think that, I like not to be like cynical, but I do think that there are some people that get into parenting or become parents because they are trying to pass on
sort of their own legacy to a younger version of themselves, or they're trying to sort of like solve their own inadequacies by somebody else having to sort of take the mantle or the torch or whatever. And I don't think that was ever really in the equation for any of the parties involved in our daughters, right? Like I think
we both had kids deliberately.
Yeah,
we at a time when we were ready for them.
And I remember it was because I was like, we were like, oh, I don't know, we'll try, and if it happens, we'll have the kid, and then we did. But before that, I think we babysat like a really young, like a really tiny baby, like that you're terrified to even like put her down or whatever, or like put her, you hold her the whole time, you're like, oh my god, don't be too loud, don't move too much. And we were kind of like, hey, we liked that. That was cool. Like the way that both of us, my wife and I, were like, that was scary, but also like we're a good team for something like this, just for even for babysitting. And then we're like, well, let's do that ourselves. And then we had our kid, and then a year or two later, there was a global pandemic. You guys had your kid like peak pandemic, right? Like it was like, so that was a big monkey wrench. Like the first time I ever dropped my kid off at preschool, there was a hand washing station outside. She was masked up, and her teacher came outside in a mask and used a temperature gun on her forehead. And I was like, well, they grow up so fast, And it was, it's like, yeah, they're growing up in the movie Outbreak. Cool. And then like I didn't see my kid's classroom or my teacher's whole face for like a full year. So it was like a whole year where I was like, I drop her off and ninjas watch her in a room that I can't visualize in my head. Like I was like, I literally have there's no, and I went to art school, you went to art school. Like I'm a very like, I need a picture what this thing is going to look like. And I was just like, I don't know, it's just like a big gym full of toys, I guess. Maybe there's like crackers. Like I have no idea what they're doing in there. I don't know what any of these people look like. They could be swapping in completely different people every single day, all masked up. I don't see any of them. And then little by little, a lot of the world changed back to normal, and things settled a little bit. But yeah, early on, it was just like, like the playgrounds are closed. So like I have this video on my phone that's like 4.5 minutes long, where I got one of those like those tunnel toys from IKEA. And then I bought like a Fisher-Price plastic slide. And then you guys got us a ball pit. And we had a 2-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, sorry about the ball pit, by the way.
No, it was great. It was awesome. And so we set up like basically like, hey, like burn off energy obstacle courses here, right? It's like, well, this kid is, we're quarantining at home early on, and we had no downstairs neighbors, and my kid was learning how to run full speed in an apartment. All the playgrounds had police tape all over them, like there was a murder. And we set up like the ball pit with the slide going into the ball pit, and then there was like a tunnel before it, and I had like cones and all this shit, and I was like, all right, you have 3 minutes to go from the couch to this thing, to this thing, to this thing, and just ping-ponging around the apartment. And it was like, okay, so we have limited resources here. There's a global pandemic. We can't really go outside. I believe at one point there were wildfires, and I just felt fucking insane. I'm like, there's no family out here to help us, and we're in a tiny apartment, but this is a fucking blast. Like we just made it work. And it's now, my kid is 6.5, and she's always just like, show me the obstacle course video. And which I always think is funny, because like when we were kids, it was like, hey, pull out that dusty fucking photo album where all the pages are like glued together because the pictures were sticky and the plastic was shitty. And
No, everyone talks about
let me see your phone and show me videos of when I was a year ago,
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about the weird developmental effects of social media on kids and growing up on the internet, too many screens and all that. But I'm really curious about just the proliferation of photos.
Yeah.
Because again, like that stuff just, just when you get a kid, your phone just becomes photos of your kid. That's all it is. You'll have like a receipt for an expense report in there somewhere, and like maybe if you've pet some of that, and like a party photo or something, but like it's like mostly just pictures of your kid. And
thousands of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like to the point where it's like you could just do like a time lapse of them growing up. And it's, I don't know, I try to take photos, but also to not, to try to live in the moment more, all that bullshit. But like, my kid also loves looking at pictures of herself, which is, she's figuring out herself. I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't think it's too bad. I think it's probably better than watching fucking Coco Melon, but like, it's
like
it's
some
funny.
weird like Russian AI generated like cartoon or whatever
Yeah.
that's on YouTube.
No, there was,
Yeah,
I was going to say yesterday, I was going through her backpack and I had like a really, just a fucking gold star parenting moment. There's all this stuff you dread, which turns out to be not that bad. And there's all this stuff that winds up being incredibly magical that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
This is definitely one of the things that I'm like, I was kind of looking forward to. My kid's been sort of drawing more, doing arts and stuff. And I've always been, force feeding her that since day one, just being like, let's get out some paints. Let's, do this to make things. And she's, she does that at school because that's what they do. They can't read, they can't write. So they just let them play with crayons and stuff. And sometimes she just brings home like the dumbest thing I've ever seen, where it's just like a piece of office paper that she took like one paint marker and just like smeared it across. And she's like, doesn't even, it's not representative. It's like, I'm like, this, I can tell you're phoning this in. But she had this picture and I was like, this is better than anything she's drawn. Like, and again, it very clearly has representative shapes. Like there's a thing that looks like a ghost with legs. And, this other thing that looks like a cactus wearing a hat or whatever. And there's this thing that looks pretty much like an elephant. And I don't know, I texted a photo of my wife and like this is after my kid went to sleep and my wife was out and she's like, wait, holy shit, what, like, is that an elephant? And I was like, I don't know, I haven't asked her yet. We got to ask her in the morning. And so we like sat down with her this morning and I feel like she's probably thought she was like having an intervention or something. I was like, we need to talk about this picture. What's
You can't
that?
draw elephants at school.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, what's that? She's like, that's an elephant. And I'm like, holy shit, like you drew a picture of an elephant and we knew it was an elephant without you telling us. Like that is a huge leap right there.
That's awesome.
And I was like, what is this picture? And she's like, it's a zoo. And I'm like, what's that one? She's like, that's a kangaroo. I'm like, I would never have guessed that's a fucking kangaroo. I don't think you've seen a picture of a kangaroo.
It's
and
the
then I was
Republican Party.
Yeah. I was like, what's that? And it's like, that's a jellyfish. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll allow it. Jellyfish look like all kinds of nonsense. They're pretty fun to draw. But it was just I just got so like to the point where I was like, I'm used to her drawing this, this bullshit, and then to suddenly show up with something that there's a sizable leap forward in terms of just what she's capable of doing, and just being like, oh, and like you're sticking with it, you're getting better.
How amazing is that? Like that they start by just like scribbling and scratching, and then they get into like actual visual representation of shit that they like, and then they start like creating stories around it and stuff like that. And I mean, like everyone knows this, but like almost every kid makes art and then almost all of them stop. Like they're always making music or drawings or paintings or sculptures or whatever. It's just sort of like inherently in their DNA and also part of their curriculum. And then like little by little, it gets sanded off, and life is always just like, there's no money in that, or like there's no you're wasting your time. Stop doodling in the margins or whatever. Teachers eventually are just like, no drawing on the important paper about Ulysses S. Grant or whatever the fuck. And then eventually they just go, stop doing that. And then they just stop doing that. And so I hope our kids can keep that energy going, and they keep making cool shit. We had a thing the other day where my kid went upstairs to play with her toys, and she goes up and she'll like play with action figures for like an hour after school almost every single day. And it's awesome. Like she'll just dump out a whole bucket of Star Wars toys and Barbies, and they're all having all this fun together. A little too much fun, I will say. Recently I walked in and she had like one of the women, there's this fucking Karen action figure she has that came with this dollhouse. It is straight up like call the police on a lemonade stand action figure. Like this lady is at the PTA meetings and she's talking about how like they shouldn't build like an amphitheater at the wetlands and all this. Like this is like it just looks like Karen, like clip art Karen. And I came upstairs and I just see my kid on the floor, and she's holding clip art Karen and she's holding X-Men 97 Cyclops, and they're kissing, and I was like, what the fuck? What's going on? And she goes, oh, nothing, and just like threw them in the air. And I was like, were you making Cyclops kiss that lady? And she was like, no, they were just talking. And I was like, because Cyclops has a wife. I was like, you've seen the show, yeah. You know,
there's some. He's got the wife. He's got a girlfriend. They got some complicated things. He's in a polyamorous relationship with Wolverine. Jonathan Hickman got weird with that. That House of X.
That
stuff
is true.
Yeah, that's House of X rated.
No, but she's usually up there playing with toys. But the other day, she came down and she goes, "Look what I made," and she's holding a 3-foot paper doll looking cutout of herself. Like she drew a self-portrait, and that's like 3 feet tall on this really long paper, because she has an easel up there, and she drew it, she colored it in, she took a bunch of yarn and glued it onto the hair.
Holy shit.
And then like took pieces of paper for eyelashes and stuff like that, and just held up this 3 foot tall like Chucky sized version of herself, and we were like, holy fuck. Like you just made a 3 foot tall self-portrait. Like this is like, if you were, 25, 30 years old, like this would be like one of your senior theses. Like this would be
or like a really big cry for help.
Yes. Yeah. It could be that. It could be like, I'm not doing well. But yeah, so we immediately just put it on her door. And it's like, this is just on your bedroom door now. Like you got to make your own wall art. Like, and we've been really good about encouraging all that and just being like, when you're done with it, like if you love it, you put it on the wall. If you don't, we'll put it in a folder. We'll go through them at the end of the year and see what we want to keep, what we don't want to keep, and stuff like that. And yeah, it's so cool seeing that. And like you said before, like everyone has been telling me like, okay, oh yeah, eventually like they turn on you and watch out. And like, girls, like especially they turn on their moms when they're in middle school. And she's always just like, tell me a story about when you were a kid, when you got in trouble. And I'm like, well, I have 10,000 of those, so you're good to go. So like, I'm always just like, I know it's, if you turn on me when you're a teenager, I deserve that because I did that to my parents when I was a teenager. I never really stopped doing that. But for now, that hasn't like really happened yet. And I'm just
enjoy it while you can, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just loving it. I just genuinely, truly love it. It is my favorite thing.
It's the best thing that I've ever done. Like it's my favorite thing, and it's not even close. And it's everything else pales in comparison. And it's just, yeah, I mean, it feels, we're definitely not even scratching the surface talking about it for 45 minutes, but we gave it a shot. And maybe we'll do a follow up on this at some point. But being a dad rules. That's no question about it.
It really does.
And on that note, it sometimes does not rule because school lets out early, and I got to run out the door and pick up my kid 2 hours earlier than normal. So, see you later.
Oh, wait, hold up. One more thing. Before we go, just a very friendly reminder / desperate plea for all of our listeners to support the show however you can.
Each and every single like, share, subscribe, rating, review, follow, favorite, bookmark, upvote, and comment we receive helps us grow our audience.
Even a good up dog helps us out.
Every single little tidbit of organic interaction we get helps convince those cold, unfeeling algorithms that this show is actually worth anyone's time.
Good old-fashioned word of mouth works too, so if you think this show rules, tell people about it. Tell your friends,
lovers, strangers, enemies, whoever.
And of course, we might have mentioned kicking us $1 or $2 on Patreon is huge. Also has some really cool perks.
For instance, $1 a month gets access to bonus content. $5 gets you each week's episode on Tuesdays instead of Fridays.
And for a few dollars more, you can help decide the good, bad, and ugly topics for future episodes.
Head to patreon.com/thisthingrules to see for yourself. However you support the show, even if it's just making time to listen to us talk about our favorite stuff, you rule, and we love you for it. We'll see you next week. Or we'll hear you next week. Or you hear us.
You'll hear us.
We'll talk to you later.
Next week.
And last but not least, a big, huge special thanks to our Patreon executive producers for helping keep the lights on. Brennan Bova, Ben Burkhalter, Kevin Lemasurier, Steve Cam, Donald Cole, Billy McKendry, Chip Chunkling, Scott Davis, and Go-Go Jason Waterfalls. You are all fantastic. You rule. Thank you.